Hey everybody, Jordan here, the PH is silent, and in this episode of the Saturday Morning D&D Show, we talk about creating encounters and motivation for your players, as well as we talk about Kids on Bikes some more and Halloween adventures. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Saturday Morning D&D Show. My name is Jordan, with a silent PH in the middle. Yes, it's weird. And I am joined always by my wonderful co-host, Sir Lucian, over there at Sir Lucian Gaming. Say hello, sir.
And I'm Sir Lucian with a loud EI in the middle.
Yeah, it's the reverse of, we're trying to do the opposite of each other, because we're like yin and yang, things like that. So,
Light
yeah.
side, dark side, Star Wars.
Yep. As made apparent by my white jacket and your dark shirt and just the general lighting of your thing, we are light side, dark side. It's crazy like that. This is the Saturday Morning D&D Show, where we talk about role-playing games. It started out, we talked a lot about D&D, and we still do, but now we've kind of like branched out, and we're playing a lot of different games lately, and so we talk about tabletop role-playing games and just the Dungeons and Dragons scene in general, because it is popular and fun to talk about. Today's show, I didn't even look at our show notes, so I don't know what we're talking about today.
I'm going to take a guess. It's going to be D&D, and it's going to be game related in some way. And I bet somehow Halloween pops into it in some way.
Oh yeah, Halloween's coming up. Yeah, so we were just talking before the show started that we need to do something on Halloween. Maybe I could try and run a Dungeon Crawl Classics game with you and some friends, or we run like a silly little D&D Halloween themed game or something. Because I wrote one for, and I'll get into this when I talk about my game, but I wrote... I not so much wrote a game as I made like some Halloween themed encounters for my Hot Springs Island group, because they wanted to battle some like undead and things like that. I think the cleric really wants to use his channel divinity, and he hasn't really been able to use it against undead, because surprise, there's not a lot of undead on the island of Hot Springs Island. So so he's like, well, can we fight some zombies or something for Halloween? And I was like, sure. We should definitely fight some zombies or something for Halloween. So I made a bunch of like Halloween encounters, because that's always fun. And it always feels like Halloween starts the tradition, or not tradition, but like the theme of themed games. Like it's always like Halloween hits and you're like, we're going to make a Halloween D&D game. And then Thanksgiving, you're just like, you're going to battle a giant undead turkey. It's going to be amazing. And then Christmas is around, and like Krampus is stealing presents from children, and it's up to your adventurers to stop him. And it always feels like the holiday games start with Halloween.
Yeah. And what's funny is that it starts probably when people start putting up the Halloween decorations. So it's always a couple of weeks before Halloween or right before. But then it's that whole kind of getting in the mood of all these different things. And it's most likely probably because you're about to your October. So you're the 10th month in. So your campaign's been running probably pretty normal. And you're, as a DM, I bet you're ready to spice things up or to throw something creative in just to get past any stagnation you might be feeling of, we've been playing this for a while. It's kind of the storyline is nice and heavy and deep and everything's good, but sometimes you just need that break to kind of reset things and get the excitement going again. I feel like that's probably something that creeps in a little bit. And I just think we all get in that mood of fun and delightful, putting costumes on or thinking about Halloween, or even just thinking about our childhood again. We talked about it in a couple shows before, where it was just like, this is an energizing time because it reminds you of your teenage and preteen years of just going out and having fun in a spooky night and getting candy, almost like going on an adventure, having a quest and then fulfilling it, and braving the night, braving the scariness of the teenagers that are older than you, or your fear of the dark, or your fear of open space, whatever your fear might be. you overcame it. So it's really kind of our first time that we do an adventure like that, because we don't have parents around most of the time, like I didn't. I mean, I know there are probably lots of kids that had their parents every step of the way, but we weren't. Our parents shoved us out the door and said, go have fun, make it back.
Yeah. Do you live in a small town growing up?
Nope, Phoenix, Arizona.
Oh, wow, okay. So, yeah, I lived in a really small town, and that was just the norm, was like get out of my house, kids. Like, it's Halloween. I don't want to see you. And so we would just like run around in the middle of the night. It was fun. They're like, be home by 11.
Had a pretty safe suburb, though. Yeah. So it was like one of those things where it's just everybody knew everybody.
Not D&D related, but I actively remember I just moved to Idaho when I was a kid, and I didn't know anybody. I didn't have any friends, but I loved Halloween. So I'm like, I'm going to go trick-or-treating, and went trick-or-treating and ran into a bunch of kids that were egging houses. And they took off running. And I remember I was like petrified because this guy came up in a huge truck because his house had just got egged, and he was chasing these kids, and he comes to a screeching halt, and he's just like, were you the one egging my house? And I'm like, no, sir. I'm just, I just moved here. And like, I was just freaking out. Like, I'm like, he's going to beat the crap out of me. This like 50-year-old man in his big truck. Cause he was that upset. But yeah, that's the other side of Halloween, I guess, is like the trickster kids running around with eggs and what have you, toilet paper.
Yeah. And it is funny because it's just like those are the things that stick in our memories probably the strongest from our childhood, is those. And it was with friends, so you're almost like in your own adventuring group in a way, and you're just getting into these games. For a lot of people got into it when they were teenagers and just moving on. So it's kind of, you start playing, doing all your game stuff. So it's like a real life analogy almost happens to you of the game stuff that you love to do. So I love it. So that's why I like it. But having themes and stuff, it's a good theme, right? Because it's all spooky. It's all, you can go any direction with it, really. And that's kind of what they did with some of the D&D stuff. If you looked at some of the videos over on D&D Beyond or Dungeons and Dragons, the website, they were talking about like Lore You Should Know and stuff like that was all about the realms of dread, or monsters you can use in Halloween, or good Halloween themed monsters that you can use. I know Jeremy Crawford loves using the witches and the hags, which are really good Halloween themed, those kinds of things, especially stealing kids, and you have to go and save the village children and all that kind of stuff. So it's pretty good. So if you want to check out some really good videos, if you're looking for inspiration, you can go check those out, because they do talk about the realms of dread, which I thought was pretty cool. It's like
Domains of
culture.
Dread.
Domains of Dread. Yep. It was like the pop culture references for when they did Ravenloft, and they wanted to make sure that Ravenloft was an actual setting, not just Barovia itself. There was more to it.
Mm-hmm.
And they were talking about how there's one for the mummy, there's one for like a Frankenstein monster, there's one for a werewolf kind of thing. And there are all these little things that you can put in your world anywhere, because the mists kind of keep them contained, and they can't get in or out, but you might get trapped every now and then for a night before you can get out. And those are all good adventures. So if you're looking for some inspiration on that kind of stuff, it started back in, I think it was, he said, Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, but I'm sure you can find versions of it throughout all the versions, no matter what version you're playing. So I thought those are pretty cool to see all that. And I think everybody's getting, prepped for that. All these costume parties are happening. There's lots of conventions still going on right now, so we're seeing a lot of the D&D crews out doing live games and presenting at the different, like I think there was TwitchCon going on, and I think maybe PAX Australia is going on, and I think there's some other stuff going on. So that's all, that's all happening right now too.
Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah, I don't know much about TwitchCon other than my Twitter has just blown up with everyone at TwitchCon, and I'm like, oh, I guess this is like a really big thing. So that's really cool. One of the, I didn't watch the Domains of Dread video. I probably should have, but I did watch the Halloween monsters video that Chris Perkins was talking about, all of the different, like, here are some monsters. And there are some obvious ones, like werewolves, you can use a werewolf. You kind of reskin monsters to make them work sometimes. Like, Flesh Golem can be a Frankenstein's monster, etc. But the one that I thought was interesting is he said the Drow. He's like, not a lot of people think about this, but like the Drow make really good Halloween things. But then he kind of trailed off from there. And I was going to ask you, like, do the Drow make a good Halloween monster? Because I'm just kind of like, well, you could reskin goblins to be, evil little mischievous things. Or I don't know. I was like, what? I guess like low-level vampires could be Drow. Like, I don't know. But I was really, that was the one where I'm just like, I think you're pulling at some far-reaching threads here, Chris Perkins.
Yeah, that or just the reference to them that being the whole spider motif. So, driders and stuff. And
definitely a drider, I guess, could make a great Halloween costume.
Maybe
or costume
that's for the
character.
Other than that, it's like it's an elven figure that's darker. So Halloween wise, yeah, goth teenagers, I guess, could be.
That would be amazing. So you're out trick-or-treating and you run into a whole herd of drow, and they're just a bunch of goth kids that are just too cool for Halloween, but they're still out on Halloween because it's like it's the most sacred of goth holidays. So that would be awesome.
Drow are the kids at egg houses, that's for sure.
Oh yeah, for sure.
That's from chat.
That's awesome.
So yeah, I can see that. So, and I think it is pretty fun to take a look at those. And it's something I've been doing in the big campaign that I've been running, but it's going back and finding these old versions of stuff that you can find out there on Drive-Thru RPG or DM's Guild or wherever you go to get your reprinted stuff, and to find these old adventures and different things that they had and make them work in like the campaigns you're running now, or one shots or one-offs or short campaigns. They're just really fun because there was a ton of creativity from the 70s, the 80s, the 90s. It doesn't mean everything was good and that everything you should go back and grab, but you'll find little Easter eggs, little nuggets of things that you'll go, oh, that was really good. I want to try that in my game to see if my players would have some fun doing that. So it's a good creative time to just kind of go back and see what you can do to mix up your campaign a little bit. I think a lot of people are doing that this month.
Yeah, 100%. 100%.
The only other big thing I kind of noticed was I watched probably more interest to me and maybe the viewers who are interested in large mega campaigns. I noticed they did a interview with Robert Wardha, who is a Canadian DM who's been running the same campaign for 36 years straight.
Wait, do that again. Say that one more time.
Yeah, has been running the same campaign 36 years straight.
What?
You are such a good actor. You should be like in plays or,
short films here and there.
Yeah, you should do good. So. Yeah, you'd be really great. No, and it was interesting to me because we've been talking about big campaigns, but long running campaigns, we're just kind of getting into some of those. But when I started thinking about what would it have been like for 36, that's nearly more than I've been alive. Not necessarily quite.
I just turned 36. Yeah. So there you go.
Yeah, so that's nearly. And it was interesting because if you go back and you watch that, he talks a lot about it. Started back in 1982 with his friends, and people fly in now because it's such a big campaign and they play their characters, and they're coming from all over the country and the world to play in this game. No breaks longer than 3 weeks. I'm just giving you some of the highlights from this thing. Mostly 2 sessions a week that he runs. Same storyline, but the story covers maybe 500 or 600 years in game. So some of their characters have grown old and retired, and they've created new characters and gone on from there. He has some really interesting ways to handle that big time lapse and the way characters are moving in and out. And then the biggest thing about it, though, is that he said when they asked him, how much do you prep for a game like that's been running for 36 years? He's at the point now where he's a no-prep improv DM at this point. Though he has a big storyline that's running through the whole thing, he's still, before a session's happening, is just playing. And it's not just online playing. It's like he has every type of miniature you can think of. He has all the Forge World sets. He has all like houses and villages and castles and things he can set on the table and people can play through. So it's like a full-on hobbyist that's taking it seriously for a long time. Lots of homebrew rules because he likes to play a fast game. He likes to play a tactical game. He likes to keep things moving. It's not necessarily 5e, which was the other thing I noticed. It's a hybrid of original D&D, but souped up a little bit. So it's definitely interesting. And I think if you're somebody who's been running a long campaign or thinking about running a long campaign, or even a mega campaign where you're having lots of players come in and out, it's something you could take a look at and maybe glean some information from and see if it's something that you're into. If you're just looking for other people that are trying to attempt to do the same thing you're doing, just like if you're coming here to watch the videos and for me to talk about the mega campaign I'm running, which I'm having to deal with figuring out how to get players to come in and out, keeping timelines straight, getting people organized, getting things scheduled, creating all the stuff, like all the online maps and the storylines and placing all that stuff in. So there's a lot I'm doing too. And maybe any of that will help you if you're one of those types of people that are looking to run a really big campaign.
Yeah, that sounds I mean, I can't even imagine running a game that long. And I'm assuming it's with not the same like people, because I didn't watch the interview or anything, but they had it sounds like he has multiple people that he's running in this game, but it's still like a one world game that you've been 36 years been crafting and creating and stuff. Have they updated editions? Like, did they start with, you know, AD&D and then worked their way into other versions of D&D and just kind of kept the same story, or is he still playing AD&D? Do you know?
Yeah, I think he's still playing the old school homebrewed version of like AD&D kind of stuff. And without jumping, I don't think he didn't mention like jumping to 4th or jumping to 5th.
Yeah.
Maybe some of the stuff from 3rd got into the game, but it didn't sound like, you know, 4th or 5th did.
Interesting.
Yeah. So very interesting guy and a very interesting setup. They streamed their very first game ever, and you can find that out on YouTube now. I think it's _game DM, I think is what it is. If that's not right, send me a message and I'll find the link again and send it over to you. For anybody that's out there too, you can just get me on YouTube or Twitter or what we're on right now, Twitch. Somebody said we had a glitch in Twitch. Yeah, we didn't notice anything on our side, but maybe something happened over at Twitch. And if it's TwitchCon, a lot could be happening over there. So,
but we're back.
Yeah, but hopefully we're back. It didn't seem like we went anywhere. But so those are the big things that I saw in the D&D news. They're big charity events happening in November, the first week or so of November. So they're doing their Extra Life stuff, which is a lot of cool things you can get involved in. There was one that if I knew my wife wouldn't completely divorce me, I would have spent the money to get on Mike Merle's Happy Fun Hour as a guest. You can get it for, I think it's like $2,000 or something for charity. Wow. And I was like, if I could get that past my wife without her knowing, I think I would have done that just so I could be on the Mike Merle's Happy Hour show. Or you could do one for the Spoilers and Swag show, or you could do one for Greg Tito's show, I think was the other one. I thought, oh, that'd be super cool to get on those shows.
That would be fun.
My wife would kill me for spending that much money.
Yeah, so it's a lot of money. It's for a good cause. Yeah,
it's for charity.
It's for a good cause, but still, that's a lot of money. It reminds me of that go play D&D in a castle that they were doing like last year or something. Yeah. And that also would have been really cool, but yeah, it's like, that's just a lot of money. So
almost tried that one hard. I talked to my wife about it. We looked at flights because I thought I would be able to talk her into going, and then she could go do things in Europe while I was just gaming the whole time, because I didn't care. I just wanted to game the whole time with all those guys. And she could be out looking at castles and vineyards and taverns and all the, you know, historical stuff that she did. But again, it was super expensive. Whoever went to those, I'm glad they have a really good job. That was a lot of money to do that.
And then like, I only bring this up because I backed this Kickstarter, but Goodman Games, who makes DCC Dungeon Crawl Classics, they made an expansion to it, and it's called the Dungeon Crawl Classics Annual Volume 1, and I guess they've been working on this book for like the last 4 years, and now it's finally like, they're like, okay, we actually are starting the Kickstarter to get it. We have all the documents written, but it's just kind of an expansion to Dungeon Crawl Classics. So if you enjoy DCC, you can check that out and go, go hang out with, not hang out, but you can go check out that link and get it if you want. I pledged to it, so I'm really excited. It's already fulfilled, so it's going to be awesome. And it's like extra patrons and spells and things like that. And then on top, like in the Dungeon Crawl Classics news, my birthday was last week, and my wife got me Mutant Crawl Classics, which is it's a standalone game, but really it's like I was reading online and they were saying it works better as a companion piece to Dungeon Crawl Classics more than a standalone game. But it's really cool, and I'm about, I don't know, maybe like 3/4 of the way reading through it right now, and it's just really fun. There's all these like cool because you can be a pure strain human or a mutant or a manimal, or which is like a anthropomorphic animal. Or a plantient, which is like an anthropomorphic plant. But the the manimals and the plants and the mutants all have mutations, and you roll randomly on this chart to see if you have weird mutations. And so you might have 4 arms, which gives you 2 actions per round instead of 1. Or they might be hindrances, like you lost an appendage and now you have to you lose 20 feet of your movement because you only have 1 leg. So really cool stuff. And it fits with the theme of Dungeon Crawl Classics, where you roll randomly for really good stuff to happen to you or really bad stuff to happen to you. And it really makes me want to run a Mad Max style Mutant Crawl Classics game. So we'll see if I can get that off the table somewhere. I want to do that so bad. It'd be really fun.
I grabbed that book on the shelf 20 times. Every time I go in the game store, I grab it, I look at it, I love looking at it, I love the art in it, I love reading just passages out of it. And then I put it back and I think, oh, I'll get it the next time. Then I come in, I grab it again, I'll think, oh, I'll get it the next time. I'm going to get it one of these days.
And then also for my birthday, I got Creature Codex. So my parents were they surprised me with Creature Codex, which is weird because they don't know this hobby very well that I do. But I think either the wife or my sister or somebody helped them out, and they got me Creature Codex. So I was flipping through that last night, and there's just lots of fun monsters in there. I wasn't going to pick up that book because I decided I had enough monsters. But now that I have it, I'm really happy that I have it because there's just really cool, creative monsters in there. So I'm excited for Creature Codex and what it can be. I don't know if you guys use Kobold Fight Club, which is a website to kind of create balanced encounters with Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. And they have Tome of Beasts in there, but I don't know if they have Creature Codex in there yet. And so I'm waiting for them to update their things because I use that a lot when I'm creating encounters. And then I can pick I want an undead monster for this, and I can filter by undead, and then it'll tell me the page numbers in the Creature Codex or the Tome of Beasts, what monster is on what page number, and I can use it. But yeah, I've just been reading nonstop RPG books the past week, and it's been glorious. So
yes, I love reading them. It just gets you so excited to play a game or run a game or find out people that are doing that game all of them. I was reading my Overlight book again because I just gotten that one when we were down at Gen Con, and then I was going back through Tales from the Loop because I was listening to your game, which was the Kids on Bikes game, which was super funny.
Yeah,
my favorite part of the whole thing was the Terry Funk Super Fan, which was super funny. That whole thing was pretty good, and it was fun to listen to how the group learned a new game with you at the same time. It felt like maybe some of them understood role playing, maybe some of them maybe didn't, but they were feeling their way through it or feeling the way of making connections with each other. And I haven't got through the entire thing yet, but it was really fun just to sit and watch and listen to that, because I love groups that are starting from scratch, starting new, kind of feeling things out. And in that style of game, which we talked about a lot last week, was they get to kind of add into the storyline. So it really brings them in and draws them in. So I thought that was really cool. And so all of that this week has been the same. I'm reading RPGs and I'm grabbing more stuff, and I've got more Kickstarters I'm in. So more stuff will just be showing up who knows when in my mailbox. I got the baby bestiary ones, I got those 2 books finally. And those are really cool because I want to do at some point a theme in one of my games where they find a young monster creature with the ability that they'll be able to raise it, and it will be this cool idea that they have a pet manticore, or they have a pet, something that you wouldn't normally have a pet of, like a pet bullet. Could you imagine that? I just think so, just as something to be unique, to really set that campaign off differently from maybe any of the other campaigns that they played. Kind of similar to Chris Perkins let the Waffle Crew have a pet owl bear. And I always thought that was kind of cool, because I think people would do that. People would try to domesticate things that you wouldn't normally think would domesticate. And probably most of the time it wouldn't work, but every now and then maybe you get it to work. And then imagine that. How cool would it be to have an owl bear fighting on your side in your battles and stuff? So I think that's kind of cool. So... But
very
that
cool.
is the cool stuff. Remember that we're getting super close to release dates too, because I think it's either not next week, but the week after, or somewhere right around in there. We're going to see the Dungeon of the Mad Mage is going to be finally out, and I'm looking super, super forward to that. I'm going to find a game to play that I can be a character in that somewhere. And then not too long after that, we're going to see the Guildmasters Guide to Ravnica, which is the other one that I will buy. I'm going to buy the Dungeon of the Mad Mage, I think, for Roll20. So that way, after I play it, I play in a game, I can go back and maybe be a DM for it and run people through it. So that one I'm going to buy on the Roll20 market.
I wonder how long it's going to take to get through that, because like you've got 15 levels, but it's level 5 to 20, which is going to take you a lot longer than going 1 to 15. So.
Yeah. And I saw in there too, like I saw Nathan put out on his Twitter, like a spoiler, something about in level 16, it was talking about something that would also be on level 23 of the dungeon. So just imagine that in your head, 23 levels of dungeon delving. You know, I've just, that's mega dungeon extraordinaire right there. So I'm excited to see how that works out. And what's the modern version of that? We've seen the 3rd edition versions of that, maybe the 4th editions if you were playing during that time. Maybe you've seen Temple of Elemental Evil back in the days of Advanced Dungeons and Dragons and that kind of stuff, or any of the other ones that are out there. Tomb of Horrors and all these things are pretty big dungeons. But this seems to be a true multi-layered mega dungeon in the 5th edition modern age we'll see of D&D. It'd be interesting to see how they present it to us.
Yeah, no, and I'm really excited for that one. It's another where like some of my Hot Springs Island players, one of them wants to run Waterdeep Dragon Heist, and he's really excited for it. So we're going to run that at some point whenever we find free time that we never have. But that will transition into Dungeon of the Mad Mage. So it's another one where I'm like, do I buy this book? Do I read through it? Because I don't want to spoil it for myself. But so I don't know. We'll see. But I'm really excited for Dungeon of the Mad Mage because as a dungeon master, that's exactly what I wanted, is a book that I can pick and choose rooms and situations and puzzles and put them in my own adventure. So I might not run the whole thing, but I can definitely like grab things. Tales of the Yawning Portal was the same way. Like I loved that I could just grab certain puzzles and traps from Dead and Thay or Tomb of Horrors or something like that and put it into my own game. And this will be similar. So.
Yeah, I think it's going to be super fun. So, and it's like a loaded back end for our holiday season that's coming up as far as stuff you can do. Because you could also, if you're doing Eberron, you could have bought the PDF at this point. You could be playing games in Eberron at this moment too, because they've got that out. So all that stuff kind of has dropped in the last 3 months here, just before we get to the end of the year. And then maybe pretty soon we'll start hearing some hints of what's going to be coming up for next year. Because I mean, this year feels like it was spectacular as far as the amount of content they put out starting January 1 till now. There were so many good things that I've done and bought with them. I'm happy on all this stuff. I can't think of a single purchase I made and thought, I wish I wouldn't have bought that. Like I've used all of the stuff. I've played in it, used it in something else, read through it and enjoyed it, used a map from it or something, all of it. So I'm really excited to see what's next. I mean, think of what we had this year. Mordekainen's Tome of Foes. We've had Volo's Guide. We've had Xanathar's. You know, we've had several adventures from Storm King's Thunder to Tomb of Annihilation to a redo of all the Yawning Portal and all those other individual modules that you can do, like White Plume Mountain and those different ones. And all that stuff is really good this year. And then, you know, Waterdeep Dragon Heist, Dungeon of the Mad Mage. It's just so good. So what is going to happen in 2019 is going to be just as exciting too.
And we usually, in the past, they've done like April, May release, right? So we should be hearing after Christmas some like rumors of whatever the April, May release would be. So I don't know. It's always fun to theory craft, but yeah. Because
I think they were on like maybe a two or three book release kind of flow before this, but now it's like lots of books. I don't remember it being this many books before.
No, it was
maybe
not.
I'm wrong.
Yeah, if you count Wayfinder's Guide to Eberron, they've released quite a few in the last like 3 months. So it's crazy. But speaking of games, what did you do in D&D this week, Mr. Lucian?
Well, we had a slightly slower week. We did do a game on our Monday night game in our Seeking Revenor campaign. Our group is fighting at the top of a black pyramid, but it's kind of like the step type pyramid. So a lot of people would say like an Aztec type or a Mesoamerican kind of style pyramid. And they've gone up to the top and they've realized that there's some things in there. The Norkers, if you ever heard of Norkers, which were these cool advanced Dungeons and Dragons creatures that I don't think have been released in any of the 5e Monster Manual stuff or any of the monster books yet. But they're really tough, goblinoid in some ways, but tougher skin, have 2 attacks, can hit a little harder than them, and they're just battling it out. And one of the fun things I wanted to point out about this game was that our group got really tactical. They got really into how the map was. They created a shield wall at the inside, a kind of a choke point, because they were outnumbered quite a bit. But because they were able to set their shield wall up and block, and then most of their guys were doing like a dodge up on the front lines to give that disadvantage. And then they had a couple people in the back were doing, you know, throwing damage out over a barricade and then sneaking back down so they couldn't be shot. And I even tried to like outmaneuver them by like holding my action with the monsters to try to get some arrow shots off at these wizards and stuff that are popping up in the back and wreaking havoc on this Norker combat that's going on. And I was just rolling terribly and missing, and it was just so good. But what was interesting about it is if you watch the live version of it, and we're going through rounds, and we probably got through 5 rounds of combat. While you're watching the thing actually happening, it may feel kind of slow, and I don't want to say boring, but it's not as fun for somebody that's not actually in it, right? They're having fun because they're thinking about what they're going to do next. They're thinking about where this is going to go. They're freaking out because they think they're going to be overrun and that maybe they should be running. So they're vested in it. But if like you're a watcher and you're not in it, sometimes I feel like it might be like watching golf or soccer or something. Like maybe those are super fun when you're doing them, but maybe not fun when you're not doing them, just watching them. But I know they have huge audiences. But the thing that struck me is that all week long, all of the players have been messaging me about the thought of them thinking back to Monday night, that battle. And they're like, in my head now that I put all the 5 rounds together and all the things that were happening, that story, if you go to tell somebody, or if you were to draw it out, or you were to animate it, or you were to live action it, or whatever, is epic. Like they were just like, this is the most epic battle ever. But yet you might not feel it right in that moment, but it's that memory later on that becomes that epicness. And they're going to remember it and call back to it, fighting at the top of a temple, you know, shield to shield, arm to arm, waves of creatures crashing against their shield and armor. They're holding strong and they're killing them as they go. And then the creatures start to pull back. I mean, just the visual thought of that whole thing is what's driving them. And it made me realize that sometimes it probably happened to all of us that way, where when we remember Dungeons and Dragons back in the day, we probably remember it even better than it was, right? Because it was the story and the action that we remember. We don't necessarily remember that, oh, I rolled 5 different times and I missed this roll and I was looking on my character sheet and I found this skill and then I did that thing. Those aren't the memories we have. What we have are these memories of us being that character almost. And like, oh, you know, our barbarian did this and had to run and jump up over a chair, and then it slammed into a chandelier, and then the chandelier crashed down on the guys. That's what they remember. It was like almost like the movie version of whatever had happened. And I think that's why we get into it so much, is because our imagination takes the raw mechanics of the dice rolling and the pencil tracking and, you know, the things that are going on, and then turns it into like a motion picture in our heads. And that's why we love it so much. And I just love being able to tell people about those things. And that's why I think there's so many people that go up to other people and say, you got to hear about my character. You got to hear about this adventure we just had. It just was like this. Because to us, it's almost like we live that moment when we think back on, like when I think back on Monday night, I think of Norkers crashing against the characters. Yeah, I think I see reconnecting. Stream might have just dropped.
Yeah, I also see that. So sorry about that, ladies and gentlemen. But if you're watching on YouTube, we are still recording. So
still recording. Stream is disconnected. Attempt. That's just Twitch telling me I'm running too long with my talking.
So yeah, a little technical hiccup, but we will get back.
Oh, I think it's back now. Hey guys, I think we're back.
Sweet.
I think the joke was, for those of you that are just coming back in, like YouTube, if you watch this on YouTube, Jordan's recording all of it, so it should all come through without the interruptions. For those of you that are hanging in there with us through the interruptions, I don't know if Twitch is having a big deal or not, but the joke was I was probably talking too long, so they were cutting me off. So I'll get yanked. And that was my big week. We didn't do too much. I left the rest open because we had family coming in for the end of this week, and where's a bunch of stuff getting the house ready for having guests over, because it's the brand new house that we've just moved into. So there's a lot going on there, but we'll pick back up next week with lots of games and lots of fun. And we'll see how Halloween goes. So I don't know, maybe we'll get something to happen on
that. Would be really fun. We should get something happening. Even if okay, well, I guess I'll just dive into what I've been doing in Dungeons and Dragons, if that's okay. Because it revolves into, or it pushes into maybe doing a Halloween game. But so I did a Halloween game for my Hot Springs Island players. And what I did is I kind of made like a town that they found, like a village within Hot Springs Island that was just odd and off. And then a bunch of locations that they could go to experience different things. So they ran into some werewolves. They went to an old creepy house, and they went into the basement and they found like a body, and it was basically like a Frankenstein's monster, and that attacked them and stuff. So I've kind of been doing these little encounters, but I really pushed them to the limits, because the barbarian was like, well, I'm out of rages. And they were just like pushed to I think they ran into a witch that melted and turned into a gelatinous cube, because I always like using gelatinous cubes when I can, and so the cube was trying to suck people up and attack them. But that could be fun to try and run on Halloween. Like maybe I could just take that little adventure and gather some players, and we could run that again, now that I've given half of it away. Or I could make something new. But
you love your slimes and oozes.
I do love slimes and oozes. And then I've been reading Mutant Crawl Classics, which has been really awesome. The one thing I wanted to talk about with the game is I have a habit of creating what I think are interesting encounters, but not necessarily an interesting story that has woven those encounters together. I usually have I shouldn't say usually. I do have good players that try to like weave stories, or what I'm presenting to them, they try to like, fit that square block in a round hole in a way. They're just like, well, Jordan's giving us this, and they connect the dots and they say, well, it must mean that there's a greater story of this in the background. And my players are doing a really good job with that in the inverted pyramid, where I really did just create a mega dungeon with like Looney Tune rooms, like just gonzo situations for them. But they took that and got into like, oh, well, I think that he's doing this because they're actually summoning slaves from extraplanar worlds. Like, is this guy, is he a planeswalker? Is he able to like jump to different planes? And so they're kind of defining this boss for me as we're going through this dungeon, which I really, really love. And I tried a similar effect with the Hot Springs Island game, with the Halloween game, but it's such a short one-shot that I really should have created some kind of narrative that connects the two, as opposed to like allowing my players to try and connect everything. Because right now they're just lost and confused. They're like, why does this place even exist? They've never run into a village like this, let alone a village full of like monsters and things like that. And they know it's a Halloween game, but I don't know. I was wondering, how do you handle that? Do you have like a thread of story, or do you kind of leave it up to your players more often than not? How do you prep a game, Lucian?
Let's just jump right into it. I've tried both recently, and when I did the pre-West Marches game, that was the one where I didn't have an overarching storyline, but I had some things that were in the world, and I waited to see what the characters bumped into before I decided trying to flesh any of it out.
Yeah.
So there was like 5 or 6 things that I thought were in this world now doing different things, and that was as far as I went. And they happened to bump into like a druid, an evil druid. And so from there, because of the way they were doing things, it really drove that storyline, especially when the fighter wanted to subclass into cleric, and he was looking for like a god. And then that kind of like coalesced into this fight between the old gods and the new gods, and the last of the old gods in this land fighting this druid. And then the storyline just hit me in the head, was like, maybe it's this druid that's gotten rid of all these gods because it thinks the gods are what breaks the balance, right? And he does it evilly, like he crushes temples and he uses all these creatures and things that he has control of to get rid of gods because they're the problem in this world. And then then I had this character who wanted to be a cleric and needed a god, so I gave him one of the old, and it all fit in. It wasn't stuff that was planned, but because the players were pushing it and we were diving into their backstories here and there, and that was driving the storyline, and they loved it. But I've also done like just straight on, the story is already kind of written, like Storm King's Thunder, straight. This is what's going on. This is what the players are interacting with. This is the next phase that's going to happen. They get to decide what they want to do, but these are the things that are going to happen. And I think both are valid just depending on what's going on. And for me, more fun was the random, the let it happen, or at least build it as you go, as the things are happening. Don't try to overthink it too much in the beginning. That felt more fun to me as my style of Dungeons and Dragons, as a DM. I know I have players, though, that when they played that, they enjoyed the Storm King's Thunder more because it felt like it was a more coherent thing, and they felt like, okay, we're on a quest, and I know we need to go do something else. Let's go do this, and let's go to this step and this step. They actually liked the idea that they knew there was something that was going on, whereas the other one, you might get into those little spots where you're like, what are we supposed to do next, until the next thread hits them or the next thing makes the connection, or there's little spots of area where it didn't connect or there wasn't. And every now and then they would keep asking me, I'm trying to save my stuff for the whatever the big bad story arc is going to be. And I kept telling them it's not, it's just a world. I'm building a world. And I saw an article that got called out earlier this week that was talking about, don't build storylines, build experiences. And I thought that was an interesting take on building your campaign or building or prepping what you're going to play. The idea that you're not doing a storyline, because that's where, when they don't do the thing you need them to do, your storyline gets off rails, I guess, at that point. And then you're kind of like, oh, I didn't expect them to do that. I thought they were going to the village, but now they're going back. And I didn't even think about that. I thought this was the next part. They need to go talk to the mayor. Right, because I'd already had this storyline of what was going on. Their story had already been kind of mapped out in most ways. Whereas the idea of building experiences or building scenarios or almost like a simulation, it's the idea of, I don't know what's going to happen, but I can tell you this. There's a town that's just north of them that they're already headed to, and that town is overrun by zombies. I don't know how or why yet. We don't know what's going to happen, but we're just going to let it run. And so it's talking about building these things and then connecting them versus trying to build that storyline first. And so I think I'm leaning in my own Dungeons and Dragons GM, DM version of making it up as we go based on the actions and the things they're doing, and then tying those things together, like you said, making those threads tie together with creative thought after the fact. Like if in that one you're saying they're trying to figure out why there would be a funhouse thing going on here,
right?
And I liked where they went with it. I like this idea of, is he teleporting things in? Maybe his experimentation is going on. Maybe he's building an army. Maybe he just likes to collect things. He's a collector. Maybe, there's a whole bunch of routes. And then when you get that little nugget, now you can really weave that story, and you can say, yes, this is Narkar the Wicked, who loves to collect species one at a time, and he loves to have one or two of every single species he can find. And he somehow has opened up portals to even other worlds we've never even heard of and brought things back. And so that could really build a cool storyline that fits in their main overall storyline, which is they want to get home because they're stranded in a strange land. So I think that's pretty cool. I think that's the route I'm going for in most of my, like, Seeking Revenar is that. Seeking Revenar is a big map on a grid map, on a hex map, and there are points of things that I threw in there that said, if you bump into this, this is what's happening. But there is no there is no Lord of the Rings storyline going on. There is, Gandalf is not going to gather the dwarves and the hobbits to get to the ring and then take the ring to Mordor, and that's going to be the end of the campaign. That's not what I'm running. I'm running more of a fluid, the world is there, and however the players interact with it, that's what's going to happen.
Yeah. I think those are awesome points. Also, I was just thinking while you were talking, like the problem that I think I'm having mostly with my Halloween game is that I didn't create motivation. And so my players are exploring it because they're curious, but not necessarily because there's a reason to, other than curiosity. And then I had the same problem in my main campaign with the inverted pyramid, is that those guys, their motivation is they're trying to get home, but they don't really know how. So they're like pulling at all these different strings, like, oh, I just hit my mic, sorry. They're pulling at all these different strings about how do I get home? Like, what is the best way? To the point where I'm like, hey guys, I made this entire like funhouse dungeon inverted pyramid for you to explore. And they were counting their coins, being like, well, how much is it to buy a ship home? Like, how could we buy a boat and just sail home? And like Jordan panicking, like, didn't plan for that. But that was where their motivation was lying. And so I needed to motivate them to, there is a way to get home, and it's involved in the pyramid, you know? And luckily they've kind of been filling that in themselves, where they're like, oh, if there's like planar travel within this pyramid, maybe we can find a portal home, kind of a thing. So it's been working in my favor. But the one-shot Halloween thing, I'm realizing, I'm like, that's something that I struggle with as a dungeon master, is I can make really interesting encounters, but I have to give you guys a motivation to be there somehow. And so, I don't know, luckily for all of Hot Springs Island, their motivation is greed, because they want to gather money to get rid of their debt to the Martell Company. And so the urge to explore is high, because they want to explore to gather more money, to find that, you know, treasure trove of gold to hopefully alleviate their debt to the Martell Company. So
yeah, I think if I was running Hot Springs Island 2, and I say this, I don't know if I'd actually do it, but I would be thinking this is what I'd want to do, is that once every 3 or 4 game sessions, I would sit down and write a letter from the family back home to them that's talking about, oh, we just lost the house, or this landlord is giving us trouble. Like, totally write it out so that it just drives them into, crap, we got to get more money.
Yeah.
This is, I got to get home. But you're right. I think if we forget their motivations, we sometimes as GMs, DMs want to create really cool experiences, or, hey, we could do this Cave of Doom, or we could do this waterborne adventure, or we could do this and that. And we forget that the players have their idea of, either I want to get more powerful so I can get to my new abilities. I want to get rich so I can buy some cool stuff. I want to get magic items so I have cool magic items, or I have some other actual like I need to find my lost brother. I need to, you know, get home. I need to help these people or whatever. And sometimes if we forget that, you're right. I think we can get off a little bit, and we're not meshing with our goals. And then if that happens, it feels like maybe something's not working right. And I've done it too, where my group wants to do one thing, but I'm like, oh, but this is going to be a cool kind of thing.
Yeah.
And sometimes, like, I even think, like, we love setting up one-shots because we love building these cool little things. Like, what would happen if Stephen King's The Fog hit a town and your characters were in it? Let's run that. What if everything was really large and you guys were really small? What if you woke up and you were all little toys in a giant child's room? Now you have to get out. All that stuff sounds really super fun and cool to us, but to the players, they want a nice, long, consistent campaign with the storyline and a background story to their character and something that's relevant to their character more than these experiences we keep throwing at them. So I have to temper myself all the time to say, all right, keep them in mind, don't keep trying to give them what they want to, but get the stuff I want to do into, because that's why I'm doing it. I'm being a dungeon master because there are many things I want to do, and I've got to find a way to work those into the games while keeping what they want to do in mind. And it's something I always try to keep track of. Yay. A little bling bling.
Fantastic. And then I guess we've got about 10 minutes left. You listened to about half of Kids on Bikes that I made. Like, what did you think of it? I guess you haven't finished it yet, but I thought I'd ask you, like, what did you think of Kids on Bikes, or just the game in general?
Yeah, I really like it. It's a style of game that I've been super interested in the last year and a half, especially when I was doing Mass, a New Generation. because that's very similar to, you sit down with a session, you have everybody sitting around, they pick an archetype, and then we go around and we say, I love my favorite part is this part where you're picking people from the table, and you're saying, all right, pick somebody else around this and say, is this a good relationship or a bad relationship? Do you know them or do you not know them? And they start building things, and they started coming up with weird things, like one kid's a bully, and everybody was having these weird connections to certain people, and then some people weren't getting as many connections or whatever, and you're waiting to see if that was going to happen. And then you're also on edge a little bit because you don't know where your players are going to take it. Like, you can say somebody's a bully, but is somebody going to come out with like a very graphic idea of all what this bully did, or are they going to, come at it from kids' gloves, or at least this is still just a fun game. We're not necessarily here to get deep, unless that's the type of game you want. And I know people do play that style of game. Like, if you're going to play a Vampire the Masquerades, it's not all just comedy and fun and pop culture jokes. It can be, they sometimes want deep and dark intrigue, or they sometimes want to, I ran a game called The Undying at Gen Con, and that's about running more of a very evil vampire-y kind of character in a town that doesn't know about vampires yet, and it's meant to be more serious. It's meant to be more horror and gothic. It's not meant to be funny, right? So it was a very different way to play a game for me, because that's not me for the most part. I don't play those kinds of games, and so it was different. But Kids on Bikes was very similar to that, and it reminded me of the Tales from the Loop, which I love.
I need to read that. I should buy that PDF and
buy the book.
Or buy the
artwork
book. I mean,
in it by that artist is fantastic. I love every single picture they draw of those old Volvos and that old Swedish landscape of the 1980s, and then some type of robotic something, or something weird, Tyrannosaurus Rex with lasers, or something just crazy in what looks like an idyllic small 1980s town of some sort. And just the way he uses the color, it just drives me in there. And Kids on Bikes is very much that, because Kids on Bikes is like what I would use if I'm going to run the ET storyline, right? I'm going to run what was the one that Spielberg did recently, where the train crashed as the kids were just outside of town, and there was something, Super 8. That's the kind of thing I would want to run with that, because it's that cool, gritty Goonies, but maybe a little darker Goonies. Like, if I want to go lighter, more fun Goonies, then I might go Tales from the Loop. But if I want to get a little on edge with it, I want to get a little to the darker side. If I want a little bit, the rules let me do it, I'm going to go Kids on Bikes for that. And that's the thing, Kids on Bikes is Stranger Things, right? The kids
very much so,
on bikes from the beginning of the show. You can't get any more on point than that, than kids riding around on BMX bikes all over the place. So I just loved it.
We had so much fun with it, and it's exciting to have it like out in the world, so people can experience it. And there's not a lot of podcasts for Kids on Bikes, so it's kind of exciting to have it be like, maybe it's a go-to for people to like learn the game. But that you spoke about the relationships, and that's what I love about it is we came in knowing nothing. Like, my players knew nothing of the system. I barely knew how to, I mean, I had read the book a couple times, but like, I had never ran a system like this before. And just casually going through the questions, we established the place that they live in, like how weird the house is, and all of their relationships with each other. And my players got really into it. They're like, I'm a bully, but like, I actually look up to T-Funk, or whatever his name was, Terry
Funk.
And so he I looked up to him. So I'm a bully, but it's because I'm not, I've got a rough home life and things like that. But like, really, I look up to him, but we've kind of had a falling out. And so people had created this like whole story before we even started, which was just exciting to have the world mapped out before you start playing. And it reminds me of like television. And you remember the first season of a show that you really enjoy, like the first season of Star Trek The Next Generation was rough because none of the characters really knew where they fit, and they didn't know their relationships with each other. And it wasn't until after that first season that it really got good, because they were able to be like, now, the Doctor and Captain Picard have a better relationship, and we kind of understand their relationship. Kids on Bikes does that in the first setting. Like, you guys create all of those cool relationships, and you have that history before you start playing, which is just really fun and exciting. So yeah.
And our Tales from the Loops game, I totally went and created me as a 14-year-old in that game, and it was interesting for me to think back. Oh my God, this is what I was like as this kid. I'm playing me as a 14-year-old, and I was just like, it brought like emotion back, because there was things in there, like it would say like when it talked about your parents and like something good and something bad, and you're like, oh, you know, how far or how much do I go in? We had some, you know, rough times as a kid. We had some, you know, parents divorce stuff kind of happen, and that kind of threw a wrench in things. And I had some brothers and sisters, and we had falling outs or things that happened, and it just, all this stuff comes up because in that type of game, you're pulling on your experiences, whether they're your own or they're somebody you knew or a family member, and how you're crafting your character. And it gets a little attached and more emotional than when I sat down and I created my, you know, first level barbarian for Dungeons and Dragons. That's like creating a superhero in a story, and that's cool. There's not a lot of connection to me in that character. But when I sat down and created a 14-year-old kid who was kind of like the computer geek and liked to play role-playing games, and in his backpack carried around the player's handbook, and that, you know, that's a huge connection, real connection. So you can get some emotions going. And when we were talking about it as players, as me, PB, Nomadic, and Anarsis, there was real emotions that could get drawn up when we start talking about, you know, one kid had a bad childhood, or, you know, somebody's parent had died, and that was a real thing for, you know, whatever. And it was just like, you can get pretty heavy in that. So it's interesting to use those games to explore that stuff that's still inside of us, that's still emotional about it, and tie it back in. But it's still a fun game. It's still this cool rolling dice and hanging out with friends and laughing about whatever inside joke that your group has is usually what most people do. You don't necessarily get it if you're playing convention games, or you're doing these games where you're playing with a lot of people you've never met. But when you're playing with friends at a table, it's always the banter that's going around. The side talk is always about, do you remember when we did this? Or you remember when we threw those rocks and we broke that window and that guy chased us down the thing? And that's happening while we're playing the game. And I think that's where that big connection comes from for this, where we make those bonds with the people we play with. We become, there's a relationship that's being built, and there's strong ties being built with those people that we sit around and roll dice with and create stories with and stuff. So I think it's super fun, and it's different. It's not, we don't get that same thing everywhere else, but we get it when we play these games.
Yeah. I think it was Jim Davis in one of the WebDM videos that he was talking about like his history of RPGs. And he said, you know, I got to a point where I was playing RPGs, and then I was dungeon mastering. And then for a while, role-playing games became high art. And it was just like, you don't understand all of this stuff. And I think there's a certain truth to that. And he went through a phase where RPGs were high art and all this other stuff. But the way you talk, it is kind of this like really cool experience that's hard to explain to other people unless they sit down and actually play it. And it reminds me a lot of some of the theater, I want to say theater games, but they weren't really games, but like theater exercises that I would do in college, and how I'm like, you don't really understand unless you dive in and try to actually like mess with these characters and improv your way through these scenes and stuff, because it can be a really cathartic experience, and role-playing games fit that niche for me as well. So
yeah. Well, putting yourself in somebody else's shoes, that's the thing that they always talk to you about, right? That's how you have empathy for others, or you try to understand where somebody else is coming from. Well, what are role-playing games? Role-playing games are, I have a piece of paper, which are my shoes, and all my stats are me stepping into those shoes and trying to play them. And then trying to figure out what is motivation, what decisions would they make given these circumstances? What is their mentality? What are their life experiences have shaped them to be the way they are? Why are they so hard? Or why are they so happy? Or why are they a little insane? Why every now and then do they throw themselves in battle, maybe hoping to die? What has happened to them that's had that? And you can explore those things, even if you haven't had that happen in your own life. You can explore those different things. Or sometimes we'll sneak in things that are from our lives, and we want to re-explore them and go back through them, things that we buried or didn't think about. And we want to say, let's go back around and touch on that. Like I said in that one, like, because when they first said he's the bully, I thought, you could go in a crazy route and you're trying to, have a fun game, but what if what if it doesn't turn fun all of a sudden? It kind of gets a little weird.
Yeah.
But they didn't. They explored it in such a way that it made sense. Like it was the style of bully that had the reasons behind it, and it looked like it would be a storyline where there would be redemption at the end, right? It was already on the road of changing. Like, it wasn't going to continue to be the bully, wasn't going to continue to be that person, and that person making the character art was already thinking about the turnaround for that. And I thought that was a great way to explore that.
Yeah, it's really awesome. Sorry, guys, we had another hiccup. We lost connection for a second during Lucian's awesome speech, so be sure to check that out on the YouTube channel on Monday. And with that, I think we'll close it out. Thank you guys so much for coming out for the Saturday Morning D&D show. We love having you live. Thank you for commenting and watching on YouTube, and thank you for sharing these episodes with your friends, your tabletop gaming group. It's really awesome. If you do listen to us on podcast format, consider giving us a 5-star review on iTunes. It really helps the show get out there and become searchable, and people can find it. And we think we have a great show, and if you think we have a great show, then go ahead and give us a review. That would be awesome. Thank you again. Any final thoughts, Mr. Lucian?
Nope. I'm sad that the Twitch is having trouble this week, but go watch it on YouTube because you'll get the whole thing, which is super cool. And we definitely could use a lot more people checking out over there, and get in the comments and talk to us about what you were thinking, because you guys do really good stuff in the chat here. It'd be great to get some of those good conversations happening over in those comments and talking about these things that we're bringing up in our games. And because a ton of you are dungeon masters, and you're in there, and you could be sharing your knowledge too, like Indoor Adventure and Skull Dixon and all of those guys. So it'd be great. Hope to see you in the next one.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we'll get a raid going if Lucian is interested in that. And so we'll kind of wait for that. But as for that, guys, I want to say thank you again so much for coming out. Go play some games, and happy Halloween. Spooky.
Yeah, spooky. We're looking for somebody that's doing something right now. Anybody got good suggestion out there? Anybody got a good person to go raid?
Indoor said Pro Restarter. I don't know if that's
somebody. Pro Restarter is up. I was looking, I didn't see that. Oh, I see the Greyhawk channel. Just a lot of them are just starting their stream soon, is what I'm seeing. So they haven't quite got going yet. Is Pro Restarter up?
Yeah, they've got a starting soon screen.
All right, let's throw it over there. Let's go raid them.
All right, guys. Thank you so much. And we will see you next week with another episode of the Saturday Morning D&D show in November. Bye. Goodbye, guys.